Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I saw you out in the Northwest.
Oh, beautiful.
And you see all these arcs and stuff go up and like lights.
Tonight, we're excited to welcome back Paul Levy. Paul is the founder of the Awakening in the Dream community here in Portland and a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner for more than 30 years. He's the author of several other books, a certified art teacher, and a lifelong philosopher of dreams and reality. In his new book, The Quantum Revelation, Paul's writerly skills and curiosities are put to good use in a book that investigates and explains quantum physics to those of us who don't quite understand it. Carolyn Mace calls The Quantum Revelation a masterpiece and, quote, utterly brilliant, unquote. Tonight's event also includes an audience Q&A. A reminder that during the Q&A, please phrase your questions as a question. And then after that, he'll be up here to sign your books at the autograph table, and you can have them signed and pay for them downstairs on your way out. Now please welcome Paul Levy.
Wow. Thank you. Wow. Part of me, or all of me, really can't believe I'm up here and I'm about to talk about quantum physics, because I'm totally not a physicist. And so of course that begs the question, how could I write a book about quantum physics? Because I don't know anything really about how to do physics or the equations or the math. But the thing I do know about, well, I'll take a step back. The founding fathers of quantum physics, when they had sort of discovered quantum physics, or maybe they actually didn't discover it, but actually it got created, it's kind of hard to tell, they were aware that they had come across something that was so off the map of what any of us had been accustomed to, and that it's been 100 years or even more since the discovery. And I've never seen a field where all of the experts, they can't agree on what is the meaning of what they've discovered. So they've developed all these incredible technologies. Quantum physics has changed our world. And yet, they're all saying that the biggest way that quantum physics is going to affect this world is via our mind, that it's going to change our thinking. And that was really interesting to me. And they were also saying, like to quote Einstein, and quantum physics freaked Einstein out. It was, his biographer says, quantum physics was his demon. He couldn't just get his mind around what quantum physics was showing. And Einstein said, quantum physics is so uncommonly important that everyone should be thinking about it and studying it. And then there are other physicists who say, basically, it's an incredible pity that the population, just like the mass population, like all of us, that very few people really understand what quantum physics is about. And I certainly don't get me wrong. I'm not up here saying, oh, I understand it. It's not that type of a thing. If somebody says they understand quantum physics, that's a sure sign that they don't know what they're talking about. So I certainly don't understand it, but I'm this really curious person. So when these amazing physicists were saying that, oh, this is something, I mean, it's being called, it's not even in debate, that it is the greatest scientific discovery in all of history. There's not even a question about that. There's no one who's even arguing that. But the question of what does it mean, that's where it got my attention, and my imagination became really activated. Because these quantum physicists are basically saying that this world is quantum through and through. and that we ourselves are quantum entities. And so, wow, that really is interesting to me. And so I've been studying quantum physics just as, I study a lot of things. It's kind of one of the things that I do. And, okay, I'm going to go back 35, 6, 7 years, something like that. I had this really, really out of the ordinary experience, or actually not just singular, but plural, that weren't supposed to be happening in this reality. And it was really, from the part of me that thought I understood what was happening in this reality, it was a little bit unsettling. And it got me in a lot of trouble, actually, because I hadn't integrated what I was realizing. And basically, I can see now that I was actually encountering the quantum. And it so blew my mind. And it got me so incredibly excited and enthusiastic that it seemed to upset certain people, and I got diagnosed and hospitalized, and there's a whole story, and a lot of you know it, and I've written a book about it. And I was one of the fortunate ones to be able, because it was clear to me that I was not crazy. Well, I mean, I am kind of crazy, but not in the way the psychiatrist thought I was. Let's put it that way. And so I was fortunate in that I was able to get myself very quickly out of the whole psychiatric thing and continue my inquiry into what I had discovered, at least in my own life. And then here it is now, 37 years later, and I've been having the realization that, quantum physics, the way that they're actually pointing at the nature of what is this? What is the nature of what we call reality? That's what quantum physics that's what they're interested in, is trying to understand what is the fundamental building blocks of this, of the physical world. And so here I am now, and I'm actually talking about quantum physics as a way of describing and contextualizing and understanding what I began to experience in 1981. Now, just to create context, quantum physics didn't just come out of a void. It came out of, there was the pre-quantum physics, the physics before the discovery of quantum physics, which was just like Newtonian classical physics. And the key characteristic of that was, we're just observers who are passively observing this objective world that's solid and fixed, and we're just trying to understand it. But we're out here, and we're perceiving it and trying to figure it out, but we're not part of it. Now, quantum physics, all day and all week, and for the last couple of months, I've been thinking, what am I going to say? How am I possibly going to talk about quantum physics? Because it's unspeakable. It's not easy to put words on what quantum physics is. But one of the key pillars of quantum physics is that it's actually pointing at, and it's proven beyond the slightest doubt. Now keep in mind, quantum physics is the most successful scientific theory ever in all time. It's never been proven wrong in one iota. And, but like I said, people don't know what it means. And typically, it's interesting, because I'm being very circular here, which is actually sort of very quantum, in the sense that in the physics community, there's an edge around understanding what is the meaning, what is the philosophy, what is this actually about. In the typical, whether it's academia, corporate world, if you talk about, what is the meaning of quantum physics, the typical response is shut up and calculate. In other words, they're not interested in the metaphysics of it, or the, what is the deeper meaning of it. And that itself is really interesting to me. I wanted to create a physics about what is the physics of that reaction, of that psychological reaction that the physicists themselves were having to their own theory. But to go back to this, really the core of quantum physics it's proven beyond a doubt that this world that classical physics was studying, the objective world, didn't exist. That there is no such thing whatsoever as an objective world that's separate from the observer. So just let me say a few words about that. So the observer, whoever that is, and the object that's observed, and the process of observation are all part of one quantum system. There's no separation. The observer is the observed. One other way of talking about that is saying in the act of observation, you actually are influencing the world that you're observing. So it's impossible to perceive the world without affecting the very world that you are observing. Which is to say that observation, the act of observing, is creative. Okay? Now, this is really the core thing that I go into, because that, as I understood that it so activated something deep inside of me, because to go back to that experience I began having in 1981, one very simple way of describing it was that I was beginning to understand or to experience that this world is some sort of dream, that it's a collective shared dream, that all of us are dreaming up into materialization moment by moment. So that was my subjective experience, and I was so excited about that I expressed it in a way that wasn't quite grounded, and that's what, but I'm a quick learner. I figured out, how to actually express it in a way that actually people are interested in and want to hear what I have to say instead of wanting to lock me up. And so here I was having this experience, and in essence, to get right to the conclusion of the book, but it's actually all throughout the book, by saying that the act of observing is creative, that's to say that quantum physics, and I want to say this very clearly so that it's out there, quantum physics is showing us, proving that this is a dream. And that's what my book is about, okay? And one way of understanding that is, okay, just imagine, through the imagination, just imagine you're in a dream, okay? And if you're in a dream, you're having a particular point of view in the dream. And what is the dream? But it's just your own mind. That's instantaneously, it's like a projection of the mind that's reflected back instantaneously, whatever viewpoint you're holding instantaneously, because the dream is nothing other than your own mind. If you're holding a viewpoint, that viewpoint gets reflected back. So if you're in a dream and you're holding a viewpoint and you change your viewpoint, instantaneously the dream shapeshifts and reflects back your change in viewpoint. Now in that dream, if you're not awake to that you're dreaming, once that dream shapeshifts and reflects back your viewpoint, you then have all the evidence that you need that your viewpoint is correct. Because the evidence is right there. You have objective proof through the forms of the dream, which makes you even more entrenched in your viewpoint. And the more entrenched in your viewpoint you are, the more the dream will just reflect that back. And then you'll be having this experience that you're actually reacting to this objective, if you don't know you're dreaming, whatever world you're in, that it's an objective world and you're just reacting to it without having the realization that you are actually the creator of that experience. That the origin of that dream and of your experience in the dream is your own mind. Now, what I just described is a dream, but that's what quantum physics is showing us to be the case in the waking dream. In other words, the way we set up our experiment, the questions we ask will condition the answers we get back. So in other words, if we're looking at a world and if we think it's fragmented and there are things that are separate from each other, we will set up the experiment, ask particular questions, and interpret what the data is in a way to confirm our viewpoint that, this world is indeed fragmented. And of course, the fact that it does that is an expression of the wholeness of this world. Because quantum physics, it's a physics of wholeness in the sense that it's shown that there's no such thing as things. Not only is there nothing objective, but there's no separate things, there's no, and that includes us, there's no separate self. That everything is interdependent. So, if I'm in a dream and I'm not aware that I'm having a dream, I can easily identify with dream ego, the dream ego, which is just a model for who I am, which is the separate self. And then, like I was just describing, everything will just reflect that back. But quantum physics is actually by showing that there's nothing objective. And so what I've done in the book, because there's people, and myself included, it's so intimidating, the idea of quantum physics, and complicated, and with math and all this stuff. The only math I have, there's one equation, and it's 3 + 1 = 4. Okay, that's the only math, and that's an alchemical sort of this maxim that I talk about. But there's no math, there's no people who are like me. I'm, when I get a science book and if there's like actual like math and equations, and I can't, that's not my thing. So, but what I'm pointing out in the book is what is this showing us? Like, in other words, quantum physics, it appeared on the scene and we've developed this incredible technology and it's changed our world. And yet the founding fathers of quantum physics are saying that's this low-hanging fruit. That's like 0.001% of what the benefits of quantum physics are. Actually, a couple of days ago, I was on this TV program and I spontaneously said, and it just kind of came out of me. And then when I watched the video, I was like, wow, I said that. And what I said was that quantum physics is the solution to the world crisis. There's no doubt about that, and I just want people to hear that. Quantum physics is the solution. What quantum physics is showing us about who we are, that's the solution to the world crisis, okay? Because there are all these ways I can talk about that, but for example, when you understand that quantum physics is actually shedding light on that there's nothing objective, that this world doesn't exist as an object separate from us as a subject, and you actually really see that, all of a sudden, what happened to us as a subject if we don't have any object to have relationship to? So what I'm pointing at is that all of a sudden, quantum physics is pointing at, well, who are we in all of this? And to the extent that we're identified with this, this entity, this reference point in space and time, that's the illusion. And that's what quantum physics is actually potentially, in typical quantum style, it's actually telling us and showing us. So I can go on in a zillion different ways, but for example, a quantum entity, a subatomic particle, what quantum physics says is that it exists in a state of this possibilities, of this potentiality. So every possible way it could possibly manifest is sort of like superposed in one state, all in potential, but it hasn't manifested yet. As soon as someone actually observes that quantum entity, that infinite potentiality, or close to infinite, it's kind of unclear, that will collapse into a specific actuality. So the act of observation collapses the infinite potentiality of what's called wave function, the wave function, into the particular form. Now, that's what's happening moment by moment. Now, the thing to understand too, you see, it's so trippy. I mean, there's no better word than to say it's trippy, and particularly in Portland, I think, right, I can say that. And quantum physics, even though friends of mine have said, don't say what I'm about to say, but I have to say it. Quantum physics it's a psychedelic. It's completely a psychedelic that when you actually contemplate it in a certain way, it just comes on and it never stops. It just keeps deepening and deepening depending on your level of integration. And so the properties that a quantum entity has is a function of us observing it. It doesn't have any properties at all before it's observed. The moment we observe it, all of a sudden it takes a particular manifest form. But if you take off each of those properties and try to get to what is the actual stuff on which the properties sort of are adhering to, and you take off the last property and there's nothing there. So there's no like actual building block, physical building block upon which the properties are connected to, and yet the properties are a function of our observation. So all of this is pointing at what I call like this being a dream, the dreamlike nature of reality. Now, in the book, I actually point out something, well, I point out a lot of things that are really interesting, at least to me. Oh, and the thing about it interesting, I was thinking about, what am I going to say to at Powell's, and I no idea, but one of the things that came to me was that, at least in my mind, there is nothing in my entire life, and I'm really interested in stuff and curious, and I study all different things. I have never found anything that's more interesting than quantum physics. There's one physicist who says, oh, when I get really depressed and in despair, there's Beethoven and there's quantum physics. That's what helps me. And I can understand that as I've more and more gone down that rabbit hole. So one of the interesting things that I talk about in the book, so I think a lot of you know Tibetan Buddhist practice. And I've been doing that for a long time. And in the lineage I do practice to, there's this phenomena, it's actually referred to as hidden treasures, terma. And what terma, the hidden treasure, what they're about is that, they'll say like, oh, the great guru, the enlightened energy will plant in the universe these enlightened objects and teachings and will inspire the person whose fate it is to discover that particular treasure at exactly the right moment in time in history, when that teaching or that blessed object, when it's really important for people to remember, to hear that. So it's sort of like this vitamin that the universe is secreting right at the exact time to compensate this one-sidedness. That's one very simple way of understanding what a terma, what a spiritual treasure is. And I'm pointing out in the book, now I have no authorization to say, oh, in Tibetan Buddhism, if somebody discovers what they think is a terma, there are these enlightened beings who authorize, oh yes, that is a terma, a hidden treasure, and a blessed teaching or object. I have no authority to do that. But what I do have authority to is just to sort of, to imagine. And as I've studied quantum physics, it seems to me 100% that, oh my God, this is a modern form of a terma. That we as a species have dreamed up quantum physics as a compensation for the materialistic age we live in. The founding fathers of quantum physics actually are saying quantum physics is initiating this new epoch in human history. Now, it's such a huge discovery. To say that it's radical is an understatement. You can't possibly exaggerate the profundity of the discovery of quantum physics, and it's been 100 years, and it's barely being unpacked. Like, what is this miraculous thing? I'm of the opinion, and I talk about this in the book, that we should be on the rooftops, just literally whatever we would do, screaming or whatever, about what quantum physics is showing us. I mean, quantum physics, in a way, and it is in the Bible. They talk about good news, the good news. Quantum physics is the good news. I talk in my book about it's analogous to the Buddha attaining enlightenment, but through the medium of science. And so, what actually, just to contextualize, here are these physicists who are going to graduate school, getting their PhD, and doing whether it's corporate, academic physics. And all of a sudden with quantum physics, like one simple way of understanding it is that consciousness intruded into the physics lab. And this is not what your traditional physicist signed up for. And it's the skeleton in the closet. That's what it's called in physics. And it could not be more clear that there's no consciousness. They haven't been able to get rid of it. That it's actually quantum physics. It's showing that somehow we have to factor in consciousness into our equation of the universe, or it's not a complete theory. And not only is it not complete, but it's mistaken. Now, what this is all pointing at, just to really cut to the chase, is that it's pointing at we have this incredible power in us that's mostly unconscious, that's invisible, that's mostly untapped, and to the extent that we're not aware of it, then it gets acted out unconsciously in a way that's destructive. And I would say that that's exactly what's happening in the world today, that we as a species, we're not aware of our incredible quantum creativity, this power, and because we're not aware of it, there are other people, whether it's the state or whoever, they're happy to take it and to express it for us, and then we become victimized and we see what's happening in the world today, where when you amplify that, we're destroying ourselves. I mean, that there's not a debate. And so quantum physics is the good news. It's pointing out that we have this incredible creative power with reference to how our experience of ourselves and the world, how it manifests moment by moment. And of course, what I'm saying, this is exactly what every spiritual tradition is saying. And that's why I'm in the book, I'm pointing out again and again the connections between quantum physics and whether it's Buddhism or just all down the list. I go into a number of different spiritual traditions. And the thing which is amazing is that, this in modern day and age where a lot of people are atheists or are just in despair or whatever, well, the modern tradition which everybody thinks really highly of is science. And but people think, with science is all about developing technology and stuff. But the fact that it's actually pointing at something inside of us. So like one other way of thinking about it, that with a spiritual person, they inquire into their own mind. Well, quantum physicists have inquired into the microstructure of the actual physical world, and they've both come to the same place. And so just like quantum physics has unlocked the power of the atom, that's minuscule compared to the power, the creative power that it can unlock within us, within the psyche, okay? And so the thing, I don't even know how to talk about my book. This is stuff I think about like all the time. And yeah, and then I just decided at a certain point, I was so far down the rabbit hole that basically it was the only thing I wanted to study and to think about and to write about. And that's basically how the book came out. And a couple other things before I open for question and answers. Quantum physics, so the physicists are saying that this reality we live in, we experience the quantum way more than we experience the classical reality. So it's not like some sort of esoteric, occult thing that you have to be really smart. I mean, if you had to be really smart, just trust me, I would not be able to have written that book. It's something that is just in everyday life. And I think the biggest chapter in the book is how quantum physics actually is impacting our everyday life. And I'll just give you an example. So say if I'm not in touch with my inner shadow, right? And so then what do? I split off from the shadow, it gets projected out. Now say if I'm in a dream, in a night dream, and if I am not in touch with my shadow, with my darkness, say with the evil inside of me, I'm going to project that out into the dream, and into the dream will walk somebody who embodies that projection, who embodies my split off dissociated part. There they are. And now I have evidence. Oh, the shadow really is out there because look, they're incarnating that darkness. So that makes me even more fixed in my viewpoint of seeing the darkness outside of me. And of course, they're probably doing the same thing to me. But the more that I see that person that way, now keep in mind, each of us is, you can think of us like a hologram where we have these infinite, sort of like transparencies that are superposed. We have all these potentialities. If you think about it, the way you are with your wife, your husband, or your kid might be different than with your best friend. We all have different parts. But out of the infinite hologram of that person in that dream who's embodying my shadow, and of course, so I was projecting it, well, did my projection cause them to manifest it, or were they embodying it and that caused my projection? That's a whole other question. But the point is, out of all of their aspects, that dark part of me, that shadow, that was the part that I needed to interact with. So that was the part that I projected out. And I didn't cause them to manifest in that way, but I made it more probable. Okay? And it's, like I said, as soon as they manifest that way, then I become entrenched in the viewpoint, so I even more project out the shadow. And the more I project out, the more they embody it. Ad infinitum, they're doing the same thing for me, and then we go to war, trying to kill each other. Okay, so that process is actually playing out not only in our, just with our friends and family, but it's playing out in the body politic of the world. And so just think about that for a moment. By trying to destroy the person who's carrying our darkness, we then are actually playing out the very inner process that was the origin of the shadow projection in the first place, which was to get rid of our darkness and to annihilate it and to just not have to look at it. And we want to kill it by projecting it out there, and then somebody carries it. We then, by wanting to kill them, we become not only possessed by the very darkness that we've projected, but we're actually enacting our inner process via the medium of the outside world. And that's one of the things that quantum physics shows. The boundary between the inner and the outer, between matter and mind, dissolves. And all these synchronistic, I have a whole thing about synchronistic phenomena, big chapter in the book. And when you understand, or that's not the right word, but when you understand quantum physics, it gives you a deeper appreciation for what actually is going on. That, yeah, mind and matter are actually interconnected and interdependent. And so are we. When you really take in the inside of quantum physics, it's like I was saying before, when there's nothing objective out there, well, who's the subject? You need an object to be in relationship to. You discover, oh, we're actually interconnected. We're interdependent with each other. We depend on each other. And out of that realization comes compassion. So it's my hope that what I'm talking about really gets out, because it's something very dear to my heart. And I'm not a physicist, and sometimes maybe it takes an outsider to look at a field and to just, I'm just curious, like what is this about that everybody is saying this is the most momentous discovery basically in all of history from the Western point of view. And it's my hope that something in the book is kind of coming, that can hopefully come through. And how about this? How about if I just open it up, because I can go on forever about this. So why don't I just shut up and let's open up for questions, and then I will try to answer. Oh, and one final thing, and then I'll get to you, Larry. One of the things when I said about the questions, what quantum physics also, what really struck me in studying these physicists, they were saying what's way more important than finding the right answer is asking the right question. So I hope you have the right question.
No idea.
Right.
You mentioned that you perceived that you could go through this tradition, Buddhism, Hinduism, esoteric Christianity. You could go on various pathways, and you would come to items that are so closely shared with the understanding of quantum mechanics, quantum physics. And in reading through the book, I came across something that really stood out for me. And I wonder if you would talk about it.
Sure.
And it's from a tradition, I mean, I can see it in Buddhist and Hindu, but it's called the net of Indra.
Yeah.
How does that relate?
Yeah, sure. Okay, no, thank you. So the net of Indra, that's what the question is. And the net of Indra is this net of like these gems that are reflective. And so each of where all the nets intersect, there's a gem that's reflecting all the other gems. And it goes out to infinity. So if you look at any one of the gem, you'll see all the other gems that are reflected in the net. And I talk about this in the book. So to the extent that any of us are able to self-reflect, we then add that much light. So in other words, we, through that act of self-reflection, we as one of those gems, like shine a little bit brighter, and that increases the light through the whole universe, because that Indra's net is really a symbol that these traditions will use for the nature of reality, and it totally maps on to quantum physics. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Could you speak louder, please?
Okay. Thank you very much for coming, and I really appreciate everything you're saying. I really feel drawn to you and to this message. I had a spiritual awakening many years ago, but I just didn't know what to do with it. I felt healing people already here. So
Right.
we can connect to your community or to you to get a little further.
Sure. So people, if anybody wants to connect with me, you know, on the table there's cards and with my email and stuff, so you can contact me and feel free. And I guess I'll just say, yeah, there is a whole community of people that have formed around my work, and it's basically about that we can connect with each other as a community and help each other to deepen our awakening in a way that we can't just by our isolated selves. Okay, and that really is very much having to do with quantum physics, that we don't exist as an isolated self. And also, it's, you know, when in Tibetan Buddhism, they'll talk about the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the teacher, teaching, and the community, the jewels, the three jewels of enlightenment, and the community, which some people think is the most important of the jewels. That's what this is, the Sangha. And it's so profound to hang out with other people who are also awakening, and it's not a competitive sport, who's more awake. But if I help you awaken, it actually helps me because we're not separate. Okay. Yeah, back there.
Do you have a chapter that focuses on your safety net, whether it's Buddhist theology or some other way in which the person can digest the information that they're getting and have a sense of calm rather than a sense of panic about it? Do you have anything that can comfort?
Yeah, that's a good question, because when you know, in quantum physics, they'll talk about that, the founding fathers, when they discovered what this was about, so their whole idea of what was reality, the floor just got taken out from under them, and it was traumatic. It was kind of like shocking. You know, it is shocking when you think the world is a certain way, and then you realize it's not. And so, yeah, in the intro, I think I say something like, be prepared to be astonished. And that's kind of like a traumatizing thing, but it's a good trauma. I would say that, particularly because it's not an accident that quantum physics has shown up right now in this day and age. Like I was saying, it's a spiritual treasure, which means it's the right time. It means it's what we need. And because of that, in a way where we've been preparing ourselves through all the insanity to be able to take in this nectar that's freely offered. And the thing about quantum physics is that the more you share it with people, the more it grows. Okay? Because it means nothing if the quantum, and I talk about this in the book, the quantum physics, it is the Holy Grail, it is the Philosopher's Stone. I think you get the idea, right? But it's meaningless if you just keep it for yourself. Then it doesn't have any value. The idea being that when you actually turn people onto it, and what I'm pointing out in the book is that it's ignited through the collective unconscious of our species, so there's a deeper spiritual awakening, and one of the major forms that it's taking is through the medium of quantum physics, but not, you know, just in doing equations, but really studying, like in physics, in quantum physics, there's one physicist who says, he's very metaphysical, this one guy, And he talks about, yeah, philosophy is too important to be left to the philosophers, because he was very philosophical. And I thought, so I wrote in the book, I quote him and I say, yeah, and physics is too important to be left to the physicists. So anyways, thank you. Yeah, so, and then the person in front of you too, okay.
I was curious how you perceived the connectivity between human movement, quantum physics, and quantum creativity. And human movement as in a dancer's lens, if I were to express that through expressionism, through movement, how would you relate quantum physics and quantum creativity to help me kind of guide myself through a dancer's lens?
Right, okay. Well, that's an interesting question, because for me, quantum physics, you see, quantum physics is both pointing at the dreamlike nature of reality, and it's an expression of the very dreamlike reality that it's pointing at. And so, in essence, quantum physics has to do with getting creative. And it doesn't make a difference what the medium is. Like, I happen to sit every day and do this weird thing called, with like books and writing, but dancing or painting or imagining, or it doesn't make a difference what the medium is. If you, like I said on that TV show the other day, I don't even though I'm the author, it felt like something came through. I was just an open instrument for the quantum to move through. And I imagine the same thing would be true for a dancer. Okay? Now what about the person in front?
Yeah, I've been wondering for a long time the implications of this and like the victim dynamic. Like if you have somebody who identifies as a victim, especially let's say somebody who, like a child for instance, who's brought up in an abusive family or something, I wonder where this worldview could be applied in that context. Because like, tradition would say, oh, well, some people really are victims. They didn't have the power, you know what I mean? Like nature, nurture, environment. There's these. I guess my question is like, what are the implications for victims in the frame of this conflict?
Right. Well, that's not an easy question to answer, because on one hand, if somebody in a position of power, if they abuse that power, the recipient of that is victimized by it, and that needs to be honored. I guess what comes up for me is, because I'm familiar with Tibetan Buddhism, and they'll talk about the levels of reality, the relative level and the absolute level. And on the absolute level, yeah, we're responsible. This is our dream, all of us. And whatever's playing out, we're all responsible. If somebody is perpetrating, well, on one level, you're dreaming that, but you have to also honor the relative level. If you just identify with the absolute, well, that's incomplete, because Buddhism says the relative and absolute interpenetrate. So you also have to honor, yeah, the relative level is on one level, that person is victimized and is being perpetrated, and that's not okay. But if I can just take it the next step, like quantum physics is actually pointing at whatever the perpetration that was enacted on us, at a certain point, it really serves us to connect with our creative power of how we react to it and how we interpret it and the meaning we place on it. We can't, in a way, undo what happened, but we can actually, where that place of power is how we actually, like I was saying, interpret it or carry it or place meaning on it. That's, in a sense, the observer effect turned inwards. Because the observer effect is what I was talking about. The act of observing actually changes the universe observed. Okay. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on lucid dreaming, and do you practice it yourself?
Yeah. Well, I'm having one right now. So. Yeah, and if you look at the book, I think the final chapter is about lucid dreaming, and I can't say enough about lucid dreaming. And for people who don't know what it is, say you're in a dream, and it's an ordinary dream, and in an ordinary dream, you don't know you're dreaming. And if you're safe in that ordinary dream, you're at Powell's books, and there's this kind of weird guy, Paul, giving this talk on quantum physics, and you don't know you're dreaming, so you think it's objective and real, and other than yourself, like that I exist other than you, and these books are other than you. And you know, that's an ordinary dream, and that's the way a lot of people go through their life. But then if you have the lucidity in that moment, and you would recognize, wait a second, I'm dreaming right now, all of this, I'm inside my own mind, all of this is my own energy, then all of a sudden, it might change or not, but the way, instead of relating to the stuff in the dream, the objects, as being separate and then being conditioned and being programmed by our reactions, you actually, and it's not like you control the dream, because who's the you who's controlling the dream? You've seen, if you're lucid, you see through that dream ego, and that's not who you are, but the dreamer of the dream, what I call the deeper dreaming self, that's who you are. You all of a sudden gain control of yourself. And so the way that you actually have, like, you know, whatever the reactions or the relationship to the forms of the dream, it radically changes. And so it's, what I'm pointing out in the book is that, you see, in quantum physics, a quantum entity, every and any potentiality that it could manifest, it's there in potential. And one possibility in this dream we're having is that we, as a species, have the recognition that we're dreaming. And not just one of us, but 10, 100, a certain sufficient number. In the Bible, they talk about 144,000, or the 100th monkey phenomena is another symbol of that. But when a certain critical mass in this waking dream, when we actually have lucidity, we can change the dream. And quantum physics says that's in the realm of the possible. Because one of the things that quantum physics did for me was, you know, just being part of mainstream reality as a kid, there is certain kind of this dogma that you take in about what's possible and what's not possible. And quantum physics has just expanded the realm of possibilities of what is possible to the point where I can't even find, like, the edge of where that ends. So say if you or any of us has this dream and you have lucidity in the dream, and say if this is the dream, and say if more of us have that lucidity in the dream and we connect with each other and we contemplate, what are we realizing? And I imagine we would say something like, oh my God, we're realizing is that this universe, we're dreaming it up moment by moment. Why are we dreaming it up in such a horrific way? Why don't we put, it's what I call the sacred power of how to dream, dreaming, sacred power of dreaming. Why don't we put and that's the part of us that is dreaming the dream into materialization. Every moment we're doing it everywhere anyway, but most of us are doing it unconsciously. When you have lucidity, you can activate that power, connect with each other, and through the power of collective dreaming, change the dream. And now I'm talking about the waking dream, and that's evolution. And that's what this is about. Because quantum physics is saying we are participating in our own evolution. And it behooves us to wake up to that and to activate that and to engage that not only in ourselves and in our relationships and in our own mind, but with each other. This is the cutting edge of evolution, and science is like completely, like, you know, just showing us this, but the traditional scientist isn't trained to interpret it. So maybe that's where people like me come in. Yeah.
In the Zen Buddhist tradition, they're just saying that if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. And initially that sounds rather shocking until it's explained that if you feature the Buddha as some objective entity, that's something that has to be gotten rid of. So do you think it's possible that maybe a millennium earlier in the Buddhist tradition, they were already looking at the necessity to collapse that subject-object duality? And
Yeah.
then as the second part of the question, like,
Yeah, I will once he finishes it. Could make it, yeah, okay.
but on top of that, like, as far as realizing these things, how much of this is graduated, like levels to attain, and then what part of it is, if this is the nature, how is it instantaneous? Can it be realized just?
Yeah. All I know is my experience, and that at any given moment I'll have this realization of, oh my, yeah, well, that's a hard one. I don't really know how to do that. I guess the first part of your question, Dennis, is that what I feel is that the Buddha, that he discovered what the physicists discovered in the quantum, he discovered it long time ago. And he just had a different symbol system and articulation and this way of actually helping people to experience it. And the thing is, all I know, my experience, I can have lucidity at any given moment and like, wow, I'm lucid. And then the next moment I'm absorbed back into the dream, into the forms of the dream. So it's a continual practice. When people tell me, oh, I'm enlightened and I basically just run the other way. The point is of my understanding of practice is that you're continually cultivating that realization, continually stabilizing it, continually opening your heart, deepening your compassion, deepening your altruism, and that you never get to the end. I mean, His Holiness Dalai Lama, that's what he says. So I think he's a good authority. Yeah.
I'm curious as to the implications of this on an afterlife.
Uh-huh.
What are your thoughts on
Yeah, wow. Really easy question, huh? Man, I mean, I have no idea. I mean, I'm very familiar with what, Buddhism talks about an afterlife and all that. And I can say one thing about that, like that, because it makes sense to me. It feels true for me. What Buddhism says is, say, okay, you die, right? And then at the moment of death, you'll meet whatever they call it, the great clear light or something, which is your true nature, which is the quantum. But if you haven't really practiced your whole life to really have the recognition of that, and if you do, you just step into it, you just dissolve into that, step out of any sort of identity, and you've woken up and it's all good. But if you don't have the recognition, and it's typically portrayed as like a trillion suns, so it's very bright. So a typical person just contracts. They can't look at the light, it's too bright. And all of a sudden they say it's like you're in this mental body, kind of like in a dreaming body. And whatever habit patterns you've gotten into in your life are gonna then play themselves out in that dream in your afterlife. And your moment, so any thought form you're having is just instantaneously, it manifests as that dream that you're having, that universe in the afterlife. And I think about the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Now the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it's a terma. Well, I talked about Spiritual Treasure before. It was written by Padmasambhava, this great adept in Tibetan Buddhism, who founded Tibetan Buddhism, and then he planted it in the universe and then inspired somebody centuries later to discover it, right when it was needed. That's an example of the hidden treasure. And remember, I was saying quantum physics, what I think is very much, if maybe exactly like a terma for this modern age. And so, but the point is, going back to that afterlife, you're in that dream body, that mental body, you're experiencing your own projections. And in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, what is the Lama saying? I mean, they're supposed to actually say it out loud. It's called enlightenment through hearing. So the Lama, the Guru, the teacher is saying, just recognize whatever you're experiencing is your own mind, is your own thought form, and you will wake up. But if they don't recognize that, more and more, the projections are going to become really fearful and like demons. And then they say they're going to faint or swoon, which means they can't hold their awareness. And they say that's the moment that the person incarnates back into samsara, into cyclic existence. But even more than that, what I just described, what the Tibetan Book of the Dead is actually about is like that's what's happening right now. That right now we're in that mental body, that dreaming body, that quantum physics is saying there's no such thing as mass. There's no such thing as matter. You can't separate out the physical reality from mind, from consciousness. And actually consciousness is fundamental. And when you recognize that, just going back to that after death state, and if you recognize that, that's to wake up, in the after death state or right now. And so the whole Tibetan Book of the Dead is really, it's like a esoteric sort of mapping about this experience. And it totally, it so complements, the whole quantum physics. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you account for multiple different people? If we're all creating reality with our mind, the quantum experience, can you speak a little bit about, I mean, if you take that to the nth degree, then we're talking about solipsism, right? So like you're the only one that exists, and everything is a reflection of you, or everything So other consciousnesses are playing a part of that quantum creation. Can
Yeah.
you speak a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Well, we're having a mass shared dream. We're all co-dreaming. So say if I have lucidity and I become fully enlightened, and I want to use my enlightenment to change, the dream, I can't do that because, no, there are 7.5 of other billion humans also co-dreaming, and plus all other species. We're all co-dreaming together. So it's not quite like that. And actually, a thing that your question made me think of is a beautiful way, and then I'm also thinking we should stop because Powell's really impressed upon me we needed to stop by about 8:30. And I don't want to break the rules, and that is, say, and in Portland, it's so beautiful here, and with the weather, say if it'll rain, there'll be like a rainbow. And spiritual, these different traditions and quantum physics. Quantum physics will say, oh, this universe is like a rainbow. Now think about what a rainbow is. It's a combination of 3 factors. There's light, there's water, and there's consciousness. And those 3 have to be there in a certain relationship or there's no rainbow, right? Now take it one step further. If all of us, if we were outside right now and there was a rainbow, and if we all saw that rainbow, we're all seeing our own private rainbow. There's no one rainbow. Each of us are at a little bit of a different angle. And that rainbow, it doesn't exist out there. It exists as an image in our mind, okay? But we're all seeing, we're not seeing the objective rainbow, just like quantum physics is saying there's no objective world. That's how it maps on. We're each seeing our own rainbow, and one way of contextualizing what's happening in the world is that people are fighting over whose version of that rainbow is true, which is so absurd. And just one final thing, and then we'll close, I guess, and I'll sign books, and that is, I think it might be a good thing for me to point out we're in the middle of a collective psychosis, in case anybody hasn't realized. And I have other books that I've written about that, and we're all dreaming up, we're all colluding to the extent that we're asleep and we're not dealing with our stuff. We're all colluding in that collective psychosis. We can't separate it out. And quantum physics is saying, yeah, that's absolutely true. We're observer participants. We're actually co-creating this world. And when there's enough of us who actually have that recognition and connect with each other, not through the separate self, but with the recognition that we're all actually interconnected and interdependent, we can activate, there's this genius, this collective genius. We can activate the collective genius. We could conspire to co-inspire. We could dream ourselves awake, and we can change the world. And that's not New Age woo-woo BS. That's actually what quantum physics is pointing at. So thank you very much.
Thanks everyone for coming out. Mine is starting over here on this side of the room, going all the way down to the window. Books on the carts back over there if you didn't do it.